Hello everyone. So today we are going to do Leetcode daily challenge. So train some query to the immutable. So basically in this question we are given with yesterday's question was about 1D prefix sum, right? So today's question is about 2D prefix sum. As it is already mentioned that it is immutable, so that is we are not required to mutate the original input which is being given to us. So we would be required to use extra space and do a precomputation in that. Now before moving ahead, let me show it that what it is like. It's something like that. We were having a prefix sum. We were having 1D prefix sum, right? Now we are having a 2D prefix sum which we are required to make. So for this particular and for all the queries which we are required to have the sum for the same. To be precise, I just wanted to say that it is a variation of 1D prefix sum. Only the dimensions are being changed. That is the thing here. And in that context only, we are required to do all our pre-computation in a separate 2D vector so that we could easily extract our queries from them. And in that pre-computation only, we will be having our time complexity and space complexity as m cross n, where m is the number of rows which we are having in this and n are number of columns which we are having in this input. And extracting the answer from this would be a mathematical expression only. So it would be simply means our time complexity would be simply order of 1 and this pre-computation will take something about m into n and the space complexity would be m into n for the fact of the answer matrix which we would be having. Now I have just given you the overview what this question is like, because see we are given you the 2D matrix. We are given the 2D matrix handle multiple queries of following type. Calculate the sum of elements of matrix inside the rectangle defined by upper left corner. That is whatever upper left corner would be given to us with row 1 column 1 and the lower right corner, that is this particular, it would be given by this row 2 and column 2, and we are given with this class num matrix class in which we are having two functions. Num matrix, this is basically a constructor, and this function sum region. So this particular is used for initializing all the object with the integer matrix, and this sum region function would be given with the coordinates, and these, according to these coordinates, we are required to return the sum of the elements of matrix inside the rectangle defined by upper left corner and lower right corner. So these are two functions of the class in which we are required to implement. Okay. Now let us take for the constraint. So the constraint which we are given here are something like, so basically m into n won't cross this 10 raised to the 5, so our solution should be m into n only. And then not elements, but row 1 and row 2, they are starting from basically zero-based indexing is there, and at most 10 raised to the 4 calls will be made to the sum. So basically queries could be till 10 raised to the 4 only. So these are the constraints for this question. So now before moving ahead, let me give you some brief about how this comes up. So for 1D prefix sum, how we were doing, yesterday's question was about 1D prefix sum only. So how we were doing that was something like this, that in the first we were directly having this matrix of 0. Matrix of 0 was simply the input vector, and here we were calculating this particular sum by checking what sum was here and what sum is required to be here. So that's the answer 0 matrix 1. And here answer 1, basically whatsoever sum was here plus whatsoever is required here from that matrix. So like this we were calculating a 1D prefix sum. But for 2D prefix sum, how we are required is, again for the first one we are required with the input itself, right? So we would be having this by the input, and then for this particular block we are required with the previous one which was there and the present input. For here we are required the previous one and the present is there. And now for this particular block which is at the diagonal, here we are required with subtracting this answer of 0, 0, basically this particular portion, because see, if we want to calculate for this particular, right, we would be requiring this, this and this, right? Here at this particular block we would be having this one also. At this particular block, basically at this particular block means at this block we would be having this particular sum, and at this particular block we would be having this particular sum, right? And at this particular block we are having the one itself, and this pinkish one, it would be having, it is required to have answer of all this, right? So for all this, what we are required to do is, we would be simply having this particular sum would be here, right? So this sum includes this one and this one, right? So this would be added, and then this particular also need to be come here. So this will be having this one and this one, right? So again this will be added here. But now you can see that this particular block has been counted twice, so we are required to subtract this one. So that's why we are subtracting that previous 0, 0 block, then adding the right, this one is basically the lower one, this one, and then this one, and then whatever is required to be at that particular position, we are adding that particular. So this is how we are calculating a 2D prefix sum. Earlier we were doing for the 1D prefix sum, but now it is for 2D prefix sum. So this is how we would be doing, right? This is for the portion of calculating, basically making a 2D prefix sum. And this is for the scenario when we take dp of rc, not the dp of r plus 1 and c plus 1. Basically for doing the equation and reducing the complexity, not the time complexity, the space complexity, but the complexity of writing the code. So reducing this complexity of our code, we would be using this particular, not this particular, but the formula which we are using here, it will remain the same only. So for I'll show you that in the code itself, but the main scenario is this only, that for calculating the sum we are checking something like this. Now comes the part for calculating the queries on this 2D prefix, because we would be given with row 1, row 2, column 1, column 2, and that row 1, row 2 could be any row 1 or any column row 2, right? So for that particular, because here I am taking this 4 block, but if there are something like this, means a block something like this which is there, means much bigger one. So then we could be calculating it, we could be calculating for this particular portion, or we might be calculating for this particular portion. Yes, any particular scenario could be there. So in that context, we are required to have a specific rows and columns with us, which would be given in our question itself, but we are required to use some formula and also make observation while doing various examples of this question. So in that scenario, how we are required to do is, see, if we are say if we are required to calculate the answer for this particular block only, means this shouldn't be there, this shouldn't be there, and this shouldn't be there, right? We are required to have only this particular block. So for getting this particular block sum, how we are required to do is, see, here the prefix sum which we were calculating here, this particular would be having the prefix sum for all the blocks which are here, right? So again, here it will be having prefix sum till here, means it will be having all the block sum at this particular, right? So we'll first take this one, right? Now we are required to subtract from this. We'll subtract block 2, that is this one would be subtracted, then block 3, this one would be subtracted, and then block 1 we are required to add. Why we are required to add? Because we have subtracted block 2 and block 3 twice. So that's why we are required to add it. So now our answer would be for this block only, not for the entire block. So this is the formula which we are required to use while making our queries. So this was overview sort of that how our formula is being calculated and so on. So now let me walk you through the code so that you could get that exact what coordinates are required to be used. So for that particular thing, so here's the code. Now for that particular thing, here I've taken extra space basically to the vector, and why I've taken, because I can't make any changes in the original as it is immutable as the question states, so I am obliged to take extra space. Now these are the two functions which we are required to fill. So just taken the dimensions, and then I'm thinking that if either of them is 0, then I'm required to return at that particular moment only. Because if we don't have any input, then certainly we are required to return as it is. There won't be any sum. Then resizing our DP. Here I am taking row plus 1 and column plus 1 rather than row and column. Because if I would have taken row and column, then I would have required to keep check on that if row equals to 0, then my sum would have been somewhat different. If column is equals to 0, then it would have been somewhat different. And if both of them are 0 at the same time, then also I would have required to keep a check something different. Because here the way we are calculating, it requires to have the previous one also. Basically here it is not required the previous one but only the present one, and we are calculating for previous for next one. So here the thing would be that this is that R plus 1 in C, and that particular means this particular portion and this particular portion which are there, these are those, and minus of this particular portion. Because when we are calculating for this and this, so this particular block is already covered twice, so we are required to subtract it once. So we are subtracting here, and then we are adding this particular, means the one for a present one from our input. So this is how we would be calculating our sum. Now comes the part that how we are required to extract. For extracting, again the way I have told that the bigger block, from that we are required to subtract as here it is row 1, that is the starting, so it would be from upper block, column 2 till basically where it ends, so that's a column 2 plus 1, and then subtract this particular portion, row 2 basically where it ends, and column 1 basically from which one it starts, so that's why, and then add this one because it has been subtracted twice. So this is how we are required to do this particular question, and the time complexity for precomputation is basically this one, and queries are fetched in order of one time because it is directly a formula based, And then space complexity is order of n cross n because of this pp. So this was all for this particular question. If you have any doubt, you could comment, and please do like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.